I think this digital revolution is one of the most exciting and terrifying situations to take place in the care home environment, to be quite honest, because I think there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure to get it right. We know how much of a burden currently exists on the workforce. And I know that when we are looking at this digital transformation, my real aim has been about trying to support them as much as possible, to reduce that burden, to make life easier.
Welcome to the Health Automated podcast, the podcast where social care meets the future. I'm Mark Tops and I'm joined by my co-host Jack White as we explore the intersection of social care and technology. Jack, hello, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, Mark. How are you doing on this lovely, fine, warm week?
Yes, not too bad. Yeah, it's definitely a hot one today. So you watch, you'll probably rain because it's the weekend tomorrow, but...
Oh, definitely. You can tell. I mean, the extended V-necks are starting to come out for us both, I think. You can tell, can't you? No, I'm definitely looking forward to it being sweaty this week. Obviously, it's just clammy weather, isn't it? But do you know what? I think everyone I've spoke to this week has been actually happy because the sun's out. So genuinely, you do see that transition in weather and behaviour, which I'm happy with. I feel happy.
Yeah,
and I'm not travelling in the dark all the time.
Definitely lifts the mood. Talking of sunshine, it might not be so sunny where Alyson is, but we are joined today by Alyson. Hello, Alyson.
Hello, hi, how are you?
Yes, thank you very much. Is it sunny in Scotland? This is the question.
It is. Hey. I feel like we should be waving the flags for the sunshine. It is absolutely looking glorious. We have blue skies here in Scotland today. It is really quite wonderful. And it definitely cheers everybody up when the sun comes out. We're quite used to the rain up here.
So Friday the 13th of June 25 is a historic event in Scotland. You've actually seen the sun.
We've had a pretty not bad week, although I have already kind of had my fears about it being Friday the 13th and this be the first time I'm like sort of being involved in a podcast. I was about like, oh, something could go horribly wrong here on Friday the 13th.
On the Health Automated podcast, never. Thank you for joining us, Alyson. It's a pleasure to have you on board. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself? Where you're from, what you do?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Alyson and I am kind of my official title is Business and Operations Director for Abbotsford Care. We are a family care group based up in Fife. It was started by my mum and dad back in 1987 before I was even born. And I got the opportunity to sort of take over and continue my parents' legacy around about kind of 2020. Unfortunately, my dad passed away at that time and my mum took a little step back. So it really became my opportunity to kind of step forward and take over from there. And yeah, so continue to lead our business. We've got 7 care homes and we support adults, older adults, younger adults as well, under the age of 65, people who require 24-hour nursing care and support. And alongside that, I kind of do lots of other bits and bobs along the way, trying to do as much as I can to kind of raise the profile of social care and have lots of these really great conversations about what the future looks like and how we need to continue to keep thinking about how things might look in the future and how we can be involved in kind of taking that forward. So yeah, very happy to be here. Thanks very much for having me.
Oh, you're more than welcome. Thank you for joining us. And it sounds pretty epic what you're doing there. I mean, to take over a family business, especially one that was started before you was even on the planet, is a testament. I mean, how did that make you feel, like stepping into them shoes? Because obviously would you say you wanted to do it? Did you fall into it? How did it sort of work?
So yeah, it's really interesting. So my actual, I was all the way through school, I was destined to want to be a performer, to work on the stage and in theatre. And I was really lucky, went to the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland for my university degree, trained to be a performer, a theatre maker, and did all of that amazing work and then decided that I was really interested in producing. And I think it was always kind of marrying up that love I had for business and ideas and idea generation. It was kind of obviously encouraged by my dad from the things he did in his life. And then I went off to do a producing master's down in London for live performance and theatre, where I basically crafted the kind of business element of theatre making. Came back, worked for a commercial theatre company, did some pretty exciting things. And then at the time I was kind of working in a job that I was working like a production assistant. And I was really rubbish at it. I kept making mistakes and I was a bit crap. And I think it's because I had real ambitions of all the stuff that I wanted to do. And I was really struggling to like actually just be effective in what I was. And so they were a bit like, they hadn't made, the great impact they wanted to with a certain show. And so they were looking to make some kind of let goes, and they were kind of a bit like, you're not great at this. And I was like, oh. And my parents at the time were like, look, we're needing some help in the family business. Come back into the family business and, you can keep doing what you want to do and find that thing that you want to do in life. And so I came back and I joined the family business. And that was about, I think LinkedIn reminded me, 12 years ago now. And so, yeah, it's one of those things that there's obviously times where you're like, oh, this is a lot of kind of responsibility, and I didn't sort of set out with this in mind. However, I do love it. I'm so lucky to do a job that I absolutely adore, and I get to work with so many different people all the time. And really, what I wanted to do as an artist and as a theatre maker was support change and build communities and create kind of dialogue between people. And actually, I just get to do that, but in the context of social care. And so really, I'm living my best life. I like to think of myself like the queen, she didn't set out to be the queen, but she became the queen, and she's great. So I think that there's definitely that idea of a lot of the time I'm always thinking about the legacy that I want to try and help continue and support, and the service that I have to. Actually, there's some staff in the organisation that have been here for 30 plus years, longer than I've been. They've known me from, being a baby and all of that sort of thing. So it's great to be able to be part of a company that really does feel like a family. And it sounds like proper cliche, but, in our offices, we're working together. We're very women heavy and women orientated. We actually have only 2 men in our whole organizational management structures. So we're just really well connected to each other. And it's quite a privilege to be able to turn up to a job every day where people know you really well and help and want to create that vision that you've got to be able to take it forward. So yeah, it's kind of where I'm at, I suppose.
That's awesome.
Thank you very much. There's some bits there that even I didn't know. So, and I think just you do a lot in the sector, and I know you said that you utilise some of that kind of your degrees and bits and pieces. I definitely think that creativity is there. I know that when we message kind of off the podcast, like you've always got ideas kind of floating around of what you want to do, and some of the sessions that you've led that I've been involved in and not involved in, they're always really good, thought-provoking things, which kind of leads me on to kind of today's subject, because I think one thing that you and I have spoken to, and I thought it'd be a great podcast to have, is around we're kind of in a world where we've got providers, many of them are non-digital, but they're all kind of piggybacking off one another in terms of ideas and bits and pieces. And then on the other hand, we've got social care, which is full of different suppliers and sales teams and marketing teams, all trying to sell us things that we might not necessarily need, but would look good for an inspection report. And really how providers can kind of avoid implementing something they don't actually need, and how they kind of go through that thought process. And I mean, you're probably on that journey yourself, Alyson, in terms of kind of that digital, because presumably when you took over those care homes from your parents, I'd imagine that it was paper-based and you've had to implement a lot of kind of thoughts, ideas, you've had to navigate kind of those sales conversations.
Absolutely. I think this digital revolution is one of the most exciting and terrifying situations to take place in the care home environment, to be quite honest, because I think there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure to get it right. We know how much of a burden currently exists on the workforce. And I know that when we're looking at this digital transformation, my real aim has been about trying to support them as much as possible, to reduce that burden, to make life easier. Nobody wants, another piece of something that they have to do, because they already do so much. And I think that my biggest bugbear is I hate salesmen. I really, really find them very, very infuriating. And there's a lot of people who try to sell me a lot of stuff. And I suppose my advice to any other kind of provider is always be like, really stick your ground, like, and be curious and inquisitive, because the more questions you ask, the more uncomfortable these people often get, because they've got a certain remit of like, well, it's here to solve this problem, and you're like, but does it solve this problem? Because these problems are connected and kind of work together. And I think often people come into the care home sector thinking they're the sort of like, the white knight on the charging horse trying to save the day. And again, that's one of my biggest frustrations. I was working on a project at one point where it was working with tech innovators, and they were called trailblazers, and we were just people working in social care. And I was just so annoyed and upset with that terminology. I was like, hang on a second, why can't I be a trailblazer? Why am I not a trailblazer? Just because I'm not necessarily engaging in this digital aspects, there's still things that we're doing within our culture and practice and development that are actually really interesting and developmental and innovative. And creative. And I think a lot of the time when people are working in the care sector, the biggest problem that we have is that people are having to juggle the operational challenges with continuing to try and be innovative at the same time. And that's really hard, especially when you've got like different people coming into different parts of your system at all times. You've got the CQC care inspectorate sort of vibe, you've got other registrative bodies, all these people want to have an influence, want to have a say. And actually providers really have to stick their ground about being very clear about what they want from something and how that thing that person is going to provide them is going to do that. Because you're right, people can have these amazing gimmicks and they are that gimmicks, they're not actually really investing in what it is that they need and want. And I've fallen foul to that myself a couple of times. And I would say that over our whole kind of piece, we have worked with different people at different points, but we've always tested. We've always really taken a testing model approach to like, we're not going to go in and just give you all of our stuff and all of the access to everything. I want to try this small and I want to see if it makes a difference. And so actually that's resulted in me testing and piloting nearly 3 different digital solutions and not going forward with any of them because they weren't right and they weren't the right thing. And I think that can be really frustrating at times when you feel like, I'm putting all this energy into something. But if the feedback that you're getting from people is like, we don't like it, it's not going to work from us, it's not, people are then not going to use it. And at the end of the day, whatever these tools that you've got to bring in, they've got to be functional. They've got to work for the people who are using them every single day. And I think that has to be the priority. So I think for providers, they've really got to set out that vision. Like, what is it you're trying to achieve with this stuff? And then actually being able to feel confident enough to say to the tech providers, your product isn't meeting what I want and need. So thanks very much. See you later. Because I don't think that's easy sometimes when people feel like they've committed and invested in something or they've gone to that next step. It's really hard to say that it's not working and to come away from it again.
I agree. A lot of it starts with the sales process. You're absolutely correct. And I think obviously everyone's got to be introduced to a salesperson at some point, haven't they? Whether you love them, loathe them, they are an essential requirement at some stage within a sales process, such as cars, anything like that. And I think ultimately the experience comes down from there, because you get some people who can sell sands to, and then obviously from that point you'll get people that can't. And I like what I call the honest salesperson who sits in between, where they're like, look, I've got a job to do.
Exactly. Be honest with it.
Exactly. And from that point, then they go, so this is what we've got. This is what it can do. Here's the scope of what it can do. But at least if it doesn't meet your needs, instead of leading you down that path to get a sale, they go, it doesn't appear to be the right solution for you.
Yes.
And this is where integrity-based sales comes in, because even though we deal with digital software, we create it, obviously, we still get sold to by other businesses as well. And a lot of it is it's like a popularity contest as well, because you don't just buy into the product, you buy into the person, the company, the vision, and all of that comes with it. Something might not be 99%, 100% perfect, but it might be like 90%. And for that 10%, will it come? Can we deal without it? All of that sort of stuff has to be. And as you say, you've tested some and you've found at that point, which is a good way of doing things, because it's saving face otherwise. I've been one of them people before that have been deeply committed to a project, and you can see it's going a bit, but you don't want to lose face. Yeah. And you'll be like, it's okay, I put the faith there. And we see providers that have been burnt by that on a very regular basis. And it's hard because they end up in contracts, it breaks down relationships internally, it makes people want to leave their job, all because they're not taking the steps of the due diligence, like you're saying. You need to, if you're buying it in, it's got to be like a 3-5 year thing.
Yeah,
You wouldn't buy a car without test driving it and knowing what
exactly.
comes into it.
Yeah.
And if they're reluctant to keep giving you demos, or that's an alarm bell, like a red flag, as we say in itself. But we all remember the experience of being burned, and it makes it harder going forward. And in a way, it's difficult then for other salespeople to overcome their objections, but rightly so, because you don't want to be burned again.
Exactly. I honestly, I feel really bad for any salesman who has to give me his pitch, because I'm so, like, it's funny because I can be really, as a human being, I'm very nice. I hope people think I'm nice, but I swear I'm on some sort of blacklist of salespeople because they just lose all sense of like engagement, and I'm like, right, okay, yeah, fine, thanks very much, I'm done. And I will not take any further. Is that way of like someone who's prepared like a 45-minute slideshow of all the different benefits to this product, and I get in 5 minutes and I'm like, stop bullshitting me. Can this do what I want it to do? Yes or no? Well, yes, but. Well, if there's a but, then it's not what I'm looking for. So thank you so much for your time, but I'm not here to help, drive your sales further. Or even, I suppose, the frustration I can often have is with connections and engagement that we've had with some tech partners where we actually are giving quite a lot. And I don't think that's always acknowledged, what providers actually give back to tech companies when they get the opportunity to test their products and try their products. And I have to say, like, shout out to Team Lily. I don't know if we're allowed product placement, by the way. You need to tell me. Too late. But we have been working really closely with somebody in the sector who's looking to support the recruitment and using different AI tools to be able to do that. And to be honest, at first I was kind of dubious, and we'd worked with them in a sort of different arrangement, and we were having conversations and discussions about it. And actually what they've been really, really great with is like properly giving us the opportunity to test their product, to see how it works in real time, for us also to give them feedback, for them to actually be really graciously accepting of that feedback, which again is so great to have that opportunity to really feed into something. And they recognize the worth of us engaging in this process with them. They're recognizing the expertise and support that we're giving them within the context that we are operating in. And it's a really mutual thing. And I think when tech is developed in that way, when systems and processes are really organically worked through together, it actually makes a better experience for everyone involved. The last thing I want is someone to come in and say, I've got this magic thing, I know it'll definitely work. And I turn around and say, well, actually, it's not going to work, and here's all the reasons why. And they go, well, it works everywhere else. And I'm like, well, I'm telling you why it's not going to work for me. And, you can be gracious and accept that feedback, or you can continue to push what you think is going to work. And that's fine. See you later. I'm not going to continue investing my time in supporting that. So, yeah.
This is the thing, isn't it? You're luckily enough, you're like that. You've got that character, and you've probably been hardened by being around business through that whole period of time of growing up, seeing the family business, protecting your baby, your investment. And we've said this many a times on the podcast. I think the listeners are probably going to be like, oh, he's fucking going on with this again, right? And it's going to be whatever. But most managers, when they come in that role, they don't come into social care to be a business owner. They work their way up, they progress, they want to carry on doing good, and all of the other skills that come with running a business are sort of like bolt-ons that they might not have experienced yet or had to overcome, in that way. The same as one person can't profess to know, I'm a payroll guru, compliance guru, I know everything about. No one does, right? And they get sold to, and they get sold the dream. And I think sometimes it's a bit of naivety through that. Should I ask questions? Because the person on the end of the phone is telling me what I want to hear. But they're paid to tell you what they want to hear. They're paid to. They literally have meetings that day going, how do we overcome these objections? And that's how a sales process works. And I've met some awesome salespeople. I've had some work with Health Automated before. Shout out to them, because I know a couple of them are listening. And they're flawless at what they do. Their customer succession's great. They follow through the pipeline. They want to genuinely support and make a difference. And then you get the commission guy who's like, I don't care. Once you're out my pipeline, it's gone. And that's the difference. And it comes down to, as you say, like working in partnership. So obviously, we have a few enterprise customers that use our software as an example. We have a dedicated team that oversee that onboarding and journey. We understand there's custom tweaks and developments, and we sit and agree pipelines with organizations of how do you want things to go, because it can't be too linear. And as I said previously, before, when I used to be a care manager back in the day and owner operator of supported living, we was just crippled by what was available on the market. And it was basically, you have to fall into this pattern and use it this way, or don't use it. So essentially telling you how you need to run your business now. And it's not just, oh, I'm selling you software. I'm also selling you the organizational change as well, but I'm not going to follow up and tell you how to manage that business after.
Yeah, I think that's a really big thing, because everyone comes in with these amazing products or whatever, and I think the thing that I'm very, very conscious of for a lot of, owner providers, all of these digital solutions is initially, and always is, an initial investment where no one is ever going to be able to guarantee any return on investment. And that's the real problem in some respects, is that we're asking people in a really tricky funding climate to be able to put out money into these things without actually knowing what the impact or the difference is going to be. And everyone can pretend that they're like, we can have a slideshow that says like, yeah, this is what it was for this company, or this is what it was for that company. But actually the real tangible of what it's going to be for your business is such a risk. So I think it's why it's a really scary and difficult place for a number of people, managers or providers, because at the end of the day, with all of these things, you are literally taking a punt. Is this going to work? Is this going to be what I need it to be? And if it's not, I think that's the thing about, like, how can we get into a place and space with software companies, with digital kind of solutions, that we all recognize that actually short-term contracts are better for everyone because it can give me a get out clause, but it can also then allow you to make changes and developments that then can help support the development of your business. I don't want to sign up for 3 years into a digital solution because I actually don't know what the world looks like in 3 years' time. If we think about how quickly AI has developed over the last year, there's no way that we could have predicted this future even 2 years ago in terms of where we are. So I think, like, if we can work together to really think about what are the things that are going to work for the social care system in terms of how we engage. And I think, you're kind of touching on those points there. It's like having that authenticity. It's about having that opportunity to work and collaborate together. And what does that look like from a business perspective? Because those are the things that people actually don't often like to talk about. The reality of it is we are here for caring for people. That's what our job is. That's what our real focus and vision is, for making best outcomes for the residents who live in and people who work in our services. But at the end of the day, we can only do that through sustainable businesses. So what does that look like? How do we shape that future? How do we do it together? Because at the end of the day, it all has to be sustainable. If you've got a product that'll be great for, so long, we don't want to fall out of love with it either. At the end of the day, we want to make a change and make it sustainable is the main thing.
Absolutely.
Sorry, Mark. I was going to say, I find there's a couple of key influences when it comes to procuring, not just say digital software, but most things within social care. So you've obviously got what we call sheep factor, keeping up with the Joneses. So, oh, my friend uses this software. Don't know how they run all their business on a daily basis, but they use this one and they tell me it works for them. So I'm automatically signing up. And then you also get the cost-driven factor as well. So people that sometimes it might be out of their budget, or they might go, I want everything as cheap as possible. And in that case, and like, sometimes buying in the wrong systems just because of a cost point, instead of actually looking at although this one costs, say, £2 a month more a user, but actually it's going to save me X, Y, Z in the future on as you say, the return on the investment. But one thing I do agree with, shorter contracts keep providers on their toes. And this is a great thing, because a lot of the customers that move to Health Automated have been in long contracts with other providers where they feel like they stagnate in a pipeline then. So once we're over the line, there's no incentive to keep that going, because it doesn't matter if you leave us feedback, you're bound for 3 years regardless. So in that way, we find a lot of customers now go, I regret signing a long term. especially there's an HR company out there, I'm not going to name drop, but they get a lot of new people signed into 5 years from the moment they start. I think a lot of people will know who I'm talking about, or their subsidiary contacts them if the main one doesn't. And a lot of providers then go, after a year or two, when they really need that, they weren't there to support me. I can't get out of it. I can't do this. I can't do that. They're threatening. And it's just another stress. But then ultimately, we have to look at this and think, that was a contract that could have been negotiated at the beginning and the terms could have been checked. So it's a bit of buyer's remorse down the line when something doesn't work out. But ultimately, as you say, you need to argue these positions from day one. We need to get that clear agreement. You want a return on investment from us. We want a return of investment from you. What can we do to make this partnership stay on track? Because it shouldn't be we're a supplier. It should be we're a growth partner. We're helping you scale and grow. And you've got to change the ethos of the way of the supplier-customer relationship, because it's like society's changed. Take the business side away. Women are the new men, men are the ones that are left on red who cry at night when they get ditched, and stuff like that. It's true. Society is changing in general. Kids are more intelligent. Like my kids are like Chat GPT law. Honestly, it's like my 7-year-old son can tell me his human rights. When I was his age, I couldn't even tell you the difference between like a tree and a weed or whatever. What I mean? It's like they've got an untapped knowledge and resource, and people are just becoming more intelligent with the way the world works nowadays. And I think things like experiences like this podcast, you saying to people, making sure you argue your case. The amount of people that are probably sitting in a pipeline now thinking, I'm about to sign a 3-year agreement, but I didn't ask that question. And it might make them rejig and think that whole process. But in future, that will also safeguard their business as well. It's not just digital software. There's a lot of sharks out there in many different aspects when it comes to selling into the sector. And people look at health and social care as a cash cow. They look at that as the one that the government won't let sink, so they'll keep throwing money. But they don't realise that it is individual businesses, the vast majority of social care, that have their own budgets who are dictated to in terms of costing. And I think sometimes we just see that it's an easy picking sector, hard to sell into, but when you sell into it, it's easy, because I've met salespeople genuinely through this line of work over the years that will say things like, the people that you're selling to are stupid because they're not business owners, they're care managers, and stuff like that. They just sit, and it's such that approach to have.
Oh, that makes me so mad. It makes me so
it does though, because they look at it and they go, well, that person's now like signed up to this, they've signed up to that, and it's just a horrendous way to have it. But you can kind of see, because if you look online at some of the feedback people leave, I was led into you weren't led into a contract, you just didn't check the contract. So you can see where people can take them stereotypes from and go, well, actually, it might be an easy sector to sell into if you want to make them sort of things. And it's morally and ethically wrong. You're dealing with people's businesses and lives.
I think that is something really, really kind of pertinent though as well, is that like actually people potentially, you could say, are led more easily in this sector because actually they're just dying to be listened to. They're just dying to be heard about what these problems are and someone to help find some solutions, because actually the reality of it is no matter what technology now exists in this kind of day and age, right, we are still dealing with the same problems in social care that we have been dealing with for the last 10 years, probably 20 years, so actually no one has come in with a silver bullet, and the majority of the time with our current relationships within the sector and the wider sort of political kind of agendas that's going on, nothing has changed. Nothing has really impacted or changed the sector fundamentally that's seen some of those challenges go away. So the reality of when you say of like people get led down the line, they do, because they just want to be heard and they want to be listened to, and they feel like, maybe this will be the thing. I think it's just about what I try to encourage in all the kind of places and spaces that I work in is allowing and encouraging people within the sector to basically amplify their voice, to feel more confident about the fact that actually they have got something to contribute. They have got a really valid point and feeling and experience, and not necessarily feel like they should be hiding away from that. And it comes exactly to the same things we've been sharing. It is about feeling confident enough to ask a salesman and say, well, what are you going to get me for this? Or what am I going to receive for this? And allow you to drive that agenda and not be taken in by things, but also not stand for something that you think is not right. And I think all too often people can, like you say, get pulled into things because they feel like it's going to answer those questions. And especially when people, what I am very aware of is that there are tech providers at the moment who are selling off the back of, connections or partnerships that might have been made with regulators. Now, obviously, none of those partnerships are, the regulators will always say that they do not promote or support one particular product. But where there has been partnerships or relationships, those are then being foisted at care providers to say, well, the CQC think we're great, or Care Inspectorate think that we're a really good thing for, happening. And then that's when people feel vulnerable and nervous about, like, well, really, I want to be able to demonstrate best outcomes. So what do I need to do? Sign me up, and I think people are very vulnerable because there's so many other aspects that's going on that they just have no control over. They feel like they need to be encouraged to have the voice to own the control that they do have in this space and not feel like they need to be led further still down a rabbit hole they're not really needing or wanting to go. And in that sense, I always feel a bit like a charlatan coming on and talking about these things, right? Because actually, I don't use a digital care planning system yet, right? I don't use one yet. And
I'll get one of our sales team to
I know, right? Get them to give me a call. But do you know why? Because I'd never found a product that met my need. I never found something that actually fit our business. And at the end of the day, I don't want to put my staff through the trauma of integrating and adopting a brand new system. I want it to be the right thing from the start. And that means that we've tried things and tested them in a small way to see where they work. But I haven't made a big jump onto something, fully digital, because actually I'm not convinced yet that we've got the right thing. And I have loads of ideas about what I want to make that's going to make a difference and make a change. But we'll see. We'll see where those things go. I can keep dreaming right now.
But I think even though you're not digital, I think you've trialed digital solutions that haven't worked, but you're able to use those experience to then help others. And just kind of listening to you both kind of talking, it is around that awareness around, you've spoken around the contracts. So even once you've signed a contract, around that, like setting KPIs and contract management. And I think as somebody that's come from that frontline care worker, they're not skills that we're trained and taught in as you kind of come up the ladder. You're just kind of expected to know everything. And it is kind of by trial and error that you find those things out and you learn from lessons and bits and pieces. In terms of people coming into the market, both tech suppliers and others, I think once somebody's got a foot in with a provider, they just seem to spread like wildfire. I found that you can get somebody new into the sector, and then because even though we're so large, it's still so small. Mm-hmm. Bizarre contrast, but it is. And I think because it's that sheep and that word of mouth, I think and we've seen it with some of like the marketing companies that have entered the space, some of the recruitment companies that have entered the space, they come in, they work with a couple of providers. And even when I was at Caremark, you'd find one good, it might be somebody that was outside of the sector or in the sector, but you would then recommend it to every single franchise that you worked with because it worked well for one. Before you knew it, all 12 of them had it. And then they probably recommended it to other franchisees. And before you know it, you've got 20 people on, and then it just grows and grows and grows. And I think that's the worry. Jack, I know you want to come in, and then I just want to talk about kind of commissioners and how we work with them.
I was going to say, carry on. I was just going to say, one thing I do notice there's a lot of in the sector, judgment, as you say, people talk. So they voice their opinions, their concerns. And nowadays, people are connected a lot better than they used to be. So where, for instance, you could historically, let's just say 5-10 years ago, sell to the sector, gaslight a customer, or they could gaslight you. It was kind of kept on that local need-to-know basis. And the one thing that has truly upped this now is that communication. So as you were saying, Mark, one person goes in, they say a good thing, it spreads, but it equally works the opposite way now. Mm-hmm. And that's where it's good, because as a provider, that makes us want to keep on top of our game. Because let's be fair, you're never going to please every single customer that you get on. Okay, so there will be elements, no matter what. You could have the most singing, dancing platform. There could be implementation errors through the line. It could be a bit of gaslighting from the customer saying that you didn't do this, or you're saying they didn't do that. You know, misunderstandings or failed implementations. Financial problems lead to gaslighting as well, don't they? All of these sort of things. You know, we've had companies where they go into financial difficulty and it's like suddenly the platform that's been working for absolutely fine is now suddenly not working for them, but they need to lose like 90% of their licenses as well to make it work, you know. And it's kind of, you kind of get that. And I think this is the thing. A good software, a good business, anything like that will go far within the sector as long as they keep doing what they're doing and keeping up their own game. And what we find is complacency. You'll find someone will get a good market share pretty quickly and they go, these are mine. No, I've got them for 3 to 5 years. What's the incentive for me to improve? And this is where providers nowadays, as you say, Alyson, need to be more intelligent when it comes to like the negotiating. As you say, Mark, you know, people need to be more savvy. And I think when CQC are registering businesses, some of this should come back to there when they're registering a manager, same as like any of the regulatory bodies as such. They should look not just at the social care element, they should look at the scope of the business knowledge as well. Because how many times have we met providers that are in financial difficulty from not paying things like their taxes and stuff like that because they didn't know that they had to pay things like national insurance?
This is really interesting, this conversation, because I saw on LinkedIn today, I saw a post from someone who works as a recruitment agent, but was interestingly kind of putting a provocation out there that there should be a really particular assessment of providers as part of the kind of frameworks of regulation, you know. So it's not just about, you know, whether you're meeting the frameworks. This was particularly talking about Scotland, you know, whether you're meeting the frameworks in terms of all of the outcomes, but actually whether the provider as its own entity is doing enough to support staff well-being, is doing enough to think about innovation and strategy, is doing enough to think about like those financial kind of things. And some of that's taken into the sector right now already in terms of regulation, you know. In Scotland anyway, I don't know what it's like in England, but Scottish, you know, they do have the opportunity to kind of look at some of those things, but nowhere is that kind of graded or you know, kind of marked at the moment. But it's interesting if people are thinking that's the way we may progress. I mean, I think that from what you were saying as well, like a number of providers are so much more connected to each other now than we ever have been before. And I think that's a really great thing because we're all about supporting each other. The collaboration in the sector over the last 5 years has definitely been the best thing to come out of COVID. And I know it's not always good to talk about positives from COVID, but I think that is one of them. You know, we are actually much more connected to each other, which means we can be much more influential of each other as well. And we had, oh God, remember way back when, Mark, when we did that presentation, we were talking about everyone being an influencer. That's the reality of what we have in social care. You know, your care staff should be influencing what you think needs to happen on the front line, as well as you as a provider can be influencing what you want to shape the tech of what is going to be moving forward. You know, so everyone has the potential to influence, and relatives can influence what they want from their care services, and residents. You know, everyone has the opportunity to influence in social care, but we're much more connected to each other and we're much better at listening, I think, to each other than we ever have been as well. And that's a big step forward, you know, and where we're going. And I think that's what makes it really exciting. You know, all this stuff with the tech situation, we have the potential to really be doing new and exciting things in the sector, but we have to work together to be able to do that. No one company, no one organisation is going to get there on their own in that situation.
100%. I mean, you get a lot of silo working in social care, don't you? And I mean, where we say everyone should be an influencer, you're absolutely correct. Nowadays, everyone has that platform, that voice where they can go online, they can be heard if they're not happy with a service, but they can equally share their satisfaction as well, which is a remarkable thing. I mean, it's great when we look at the regulators all checking, for instance, like with CQC and the Chloe's, like quality assurance, making sure you're doing your feedback, your continuous like listening loops. But then realistically, when it comes to setting up the business, the amount of providers we'll see, I'm not sure what it's like in Scotland, but they'll get registered. Things might take a little bit too long for it to get over the line because they've had a misdirection when it comes to timeframes and getting on frameworks and stuff. So then they end up in financial difficulty and then they end up shutting down. And a lot of this could be protected before happening, because we could have a stipulation in there that says obviously we check financial viability, but it needs to actually be assessed. Because I remember when I was getting registered, now this is a few years ago for one of our services, and when I was doing all the nominated individual side of things, we just had to get a certificate from our accountant that said, yeah, the business is basically financially stable, and that was it. No one came back and checked it. No one, to the best of my knowledge, no one actually balanced the books and checked the figures and asked any questions. Like, so, okay, if you was to run over budget here, how would you compensate X, Y, Z? And although we look at as you say, the hands-on care side, the main core of the business, if all of the other elements are failing around it, that side's going to foul. And that's the side that's got the greatest potential to cause harm.
Yeah, and do you know, part of me agrees with what you're saying, but do you know what? Imagine if we outstretched those confirmations of reliability and sustainability to our local authorities, to our commissioners, to our government, and said, you know, hang on a second, are you guys actually able to and capable to manage the budgets which are set for your benefits? You know, all of those sort of things, because I think actually what really frustrates me about the sector is so many people from all different parts of the system have an opinion on how providers should be doing things, how providers should be analysed or should be kind of like done too. The reality of it is there is no sector like social care. There is no sector where there is the regulation on all aspects of what we do in the way that it is in social care, and also no system that operates the way social care operates in relation to how things are commissioned. And you have no control over that. Now, obviously, this is where Scotland and England, are very different, and from a commissioning perspective. But there are so many of those commissioning challenges in relation to not really having control of being able to set what the true cost of care is and being able to get that into your business, that actually we're on a hiding to nothing in terms of how the sustainability of the sector can continue. Because the reality of it is right now, we have no control over any of those things. It becomes increasingly difficult for us to make those sort of strategic decisions as providers we would want to make, because we don't have the flexibility that other organisations might have. And I talk to my friends who don't work in social care, who work in other businesses, other entrepreneurs, and I speak to them about how it operates, and they're just like, what? No, that can't be right. Like, are you sure? And I'm like, yep, that's it. I cannot tell, I can't dictate any of my situations right now because I'm reliant on a commission service, which means that they're the people that hold the purse strings, if you like, in terms of what we can do. And we all the time as providers are having to respond and react to other things that people are doing to us. And often, unfortunately, as it currently stands, that's not actually always based on what the relative or resident wants from a service. It's more predominantly based on what other people are telling us we should do with the service from a regulatory perspective. Because although the regulators believe that they are championing the outcomes of individuals, sometimes they don't actually listen to what's being told to them, and they're making responses that they believe are the right thing to do, when actually they haven't taken the time to get to know that. And actually, providers are the experts in those relationships in terms of the people who are providing that care, whether that's frontline care workers, managers in care services, or even providers themselves. It's all about the knowledge of those relationships that makes the difference. And actually, we should be telling other people how to do these things. But, providers don't often feel confident enough to walk into a room and be like, this is where I'm excelling and this is where I can tell you how you can be better. Because I'm pretty damn sure there is hundreds of providers out there who could actually teach things to other sectors in terms of how things should be best done. And I think we should have more confidence to be able to do that.
But I do, yeah. When I see the bits that are going on your social media, Alyson, I think like in Scotland, you create those spaces though for those conversations. I look down here kind of, and it probably is most of England, but definitely kind of Essex, the London boroughs. Even if there's providers getting together, it's them being spoken to. There's never ever a platform for what's going well, what can we change, what are those feedback loops, and like changing that. It's always commissioners, procurement, speaking to them, telling them whatever they want to be told, CQC telling that. There's never a chance for that feedback. And even if they are taking that feedback, quite often or not, they've already got an idea in their mind of what that's going to look like. So it's almost just like a tick box exercise, which I think for a number of providers around here, see right through it and then they disengage. But I do think that you've created something in Scotland that's really good in terms of providing that voice for providers to come together and to showcase what brilliant jobs social care is doing.
So,
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of influencers, I think, in Scotland. Maybe because we're smaller, we we all sort of know each other, which means, and because of that connections, like you're saying, post COVID, we all talk to each other. And so, I mean, I've got hundreds of WhatsApp groups, and I know it's a bit like that in England as well. Like things like Providers Unite. There are some spaces where it's encouraging and empowering people to make the connections with each other. And I think that's what we need to do more of. We need to, like, these spaces that you guys are creating here with podcasts and bringing people on and opening up those conversations. That's what we need more of. More honest conversations about what, like you say, what's working, what's not working, how can we support each other better? Because at the end of the day, the outcomes for everyone should be the same, which is making sure that people who are living in 24-hour services are getting the best possible care and the best possible outcomes. And that means about holding your hands up and saying, sometimes we don't get it right, and being honest about that.
Do you know what I think when I look at the difference? It's probably not going to be a popular opinion, but I'll say it anyway, is that you Scottish folk don't have an ego. I think there's like you're doing like fantastic stuff. I think you've got like Donald Mask, like there's no ego. Like I feel like I could pick up the phone to Donald now and just have a conversation. Like that wouldn't happen in England. Everybody's got some great big ego or alternative motive for what they're doing, which is why nothing ever changes. But I don't think anybody here would put providers in a room to celebrate what they're doing unless there was something in it for whoever was hosting it. Whereas I think
we do. We do the awards.
We do. That you pay
so we give them
for,
an evening to go, and every other day we forget. And this is the thing. I agree. I mean, I'm not sure if you have similar in Scotland. I'm sure you probably do. I used to be a non-exec director for the Norfolk Care Association, so Norca. And a lot of what we'd done was being the middle ground between the local authority and the care providers. You'd have subgroups, you'd have like your residential, you'd have your home care elements. And it was good in a way because in all fairness, Norfolk did respond quite well. They would send representatives to meetings and stuff like that. But you kind of felt powerless in some ways because the people that you're talking to don't really have a vested interest in as much as they say they do. They're not working directly in social care. They're working in a local authority-based department. I've met some cracking people, I will put that there, that have got a true passion at the local authority level. But then I've met some who appear disinterested or turn up late to meetings or cancel last minute on the meeting and send someone else in who won't feed back, and it just tells you the level of respect that they have in some areas of what they're taking as your opinion as such. You'd be sitting there with individuals and they're like, so what's the pressing agenda? We all know what the pressing agenda is, let's cut the mustard. But then they come out again with another 5-year framework, and it's a 5-year framework doesn't give businesses that flexibility to adapt and change. And so realistically, as we were saying, the shorter contracts, maybe a year, 2-year frameworks with pricing reviews instead of saying to people, this is what we expect inflation to be in 5 years time and your rates to be, because a lot of providers will, as you say, sign up to these. The rates are governed by someone else, and then ultimately it can lead to business instability through that side of things as well in the long term. And the amount of providers now that I've met, especially on the home care side, that refuse local authority contracts because it doesn't give their business the flexibility it needs. And some of them have technically scaled back in care hours and staffing, but are actually more profitable and viable on private-based agreements. And a lot of this all comes in, with, as you say, like with the rates. And I do feel that Scotland is better when it comes to shouting about things, because it's not just in social care. If there's an issue, the Scottish get behind it and go, this is an issue. Whereas like in England, we're sort of like, maybe at the next election someone might bring this up on my behalf if I put the suggestion in a box somewhere.
I always find this really fascinating talking to colleagues in England, because you have such rose-tinted glasses about how beautiful Scotland is. Maybe we just, I think that I was recently at an event, and it was down in London, and I was the only Scottish person there, and I didn't talk very much because I kind of feel like sometimes if I do, I'm going against this image that Scotland is really great. No, because actually we struggle with all the same challenges. You know, the reality of it is we don't have it sussed up here at all. And there's a number of frustrations and difficulties that people are facing that are really the same. And I do think a national approach from government is what we need to be able to give us a bit of stability across the board. And I think that for whatever reason, successive governments have not prioritised social care, and that has seen a huge impact. Now, you know, and obviously Scottish government, it is a devolved issue with health and social care, but that doesn't actually result in any better outcomes, and it hasn't, I don't think, yet. And we're potentially going to get a bit political, but I really don't think that the Scottish government has got it right with social care. I think that there's a big difference in terms of the political agenda up here in terms of what was happening with the National Care Service and the idea of developing and, you know, creating something like that. But actually what has happened is just a lot of money wasted and a lot of money lost, which could have properly been invested in the sector and would have allowed some of that sustainable growth and development. And although, to completely contradict myself, with your tech providers, you want short contracts. We as providers want long-term contracts because we do need a bit of sustainability. And actually, we currently work in Scotland under a national care home contract fee rate, which means every year that is reevaluated and changed. And we spend the best part of the year trying to negotiate on that fee. And actually, that isn't great for helping us look at, you know, sustainable business models which can look into the future. But I do think, you know, I don't know how we've gone from AI to funding models, but I think that we do need to seriously flip the head on how social care is funded in general and think about what that looks like and how we can really change that. And if I would welcome from any government the opportunity to really think about the funding models that underpin the whole environment, because I think that's what will make the difference. And actually, you know, what's really fun is if you go on ChatGPT and you say to ChatGPT with the best prompt ever, how do we fix a problem like social care, and what should we do to re-envisage the financial model of the future? And it has a really great suggestion that I think we should just send to all our MPs and all our local councillors and encourage them to be able to think differently and think outside the box a little bit when it comes to this, because I think people are quite rigid in what we know. And actually, just like with the tech solutions, you've got to be prepared to take a risk, and you've got to be prepared to think outside the box to be able to find the solutions for the future.
Yeah, I think when it comes to, and as I say, we've jumped right onto fees and rates, and we should completely digress. But I think when they're putting that together, they should look at what the true cost of living is nowadays, what providers are needing. So in one hand, if they ask if for a digital system, but then in the other, they don't want to increase your rates, knowing that you're going to have that extra outlying cost to bring in that as part of procurement. And this is where a classic case of not just in rates or anything, one hand don't talk to the other, you know. So it's, and especially with tech, we find tech evolves too quickly for laws to tie it down in a rigid framework. And one thing we see off the back of this, especially with AI, is a lot of the organizations going, we don't want to tell you one way or another. So they'll sit on the fence, and there's a lot of whataboutery of what should we do, and then there's a lot of the it's someone else's problem in the next election.
Absolutely. It's like, come on, we just want some solutions, but everything gets put down the line. Like everything's like, oh, well, we can't do anything about that because, you know, there's an election coming. And then the election comes, and then you're like, well, where's the change that we're looking for? Well, we've got other competing priorities. And you're like, you know, when is social care ever going to be taken seriously? As you know, we know ourselves that fundamentally, when we can get a good social care environment, there's so much other ways that it can help support the whole of our society and our economy. But I don't know why people aren't taking it seriously. And I feel like I've been saying this for a long time now. And this is what we're talking about. You know, 10 plus years, we've been having the same conversations and nothing has been fixed or sorted. And I think there's so many missed opportunities to really make a difference. You know, really tackling these kind of things head on. But I think people are a bit scared because actually it's a bit of an uncomfortable conversation to encourage people to think about their old age and what they might do with it when we're thinking predominantly about people, or even thinking about the worst case scenario, because that's what we're asking. You know, people are being asked to think about things that they don't want to think about, and that's why it gets pushed to the back all the time. And how do we change that? How do we open up some of those conversations? Interestingly, as I was saying before, so I have this Hive Mind collective that I'm part of in Scotland. We are a creative collaborative of social care influencers. And in that in particular, people come from all over different parts of the system. So we've got people who work in the national quangos, we've got people who work in the regulator, we've got people who work in social care on the front line, and we all come together to have some of these conversations. But we have these conversations in places like the V&A in Dundee, in the Design Museum, where we then take the opportunity to actually go and speak to real people and have conversations with people who happen to be in the museum, and we ask them about questions and things, and we put people in uncomfortable, people like, oh, I don't want to go and do that, like talk to a real person in the real public. And I'm like, well, that's who's going to be coming to social care, so let's go and ask those people. And I think we could do so much more to really have some of these conversations out in the open, and really kind of start to ask people the real tough questions about what it is that they want from the environments that we're trying to create. And if they're really aware of what it costs, how it works, how does it operate? Because a lot of the time people don't know anything about it until they're in it. And then they're like, oh my goodness, this is like massive. And you're like, yeah, like it's a challenge,
Welcome down the rabbit hole, isn't it?
yeah, exactly.
So that leads us on then, because you said that, talking and asking them awkward questions. I'm going to ask you an awkward question, and let's see.
No.
All right, it's nothing personal, I promise. Or that could be, what's your favourite 4 single-digit numbers in what order? I'm joking.
What? You had me for a minute there. I'm like, what are we talking about?
So, looking at where we are now, knowing that we've sat on this for the past 10 years as such, and nothing's changed. Bringing it back to AI, where do you see AI's place in the next 5 years? And how do you think AI, not just one, but as a collective, will solve a lot of these problems? Because everyone seems to be looking that way, right? Going, we got resource shortages, we need automation 24/7, all of that stuff points towards AI in some capacity. Where do you see AI in social care in the next 5 years? And what problems do you foresee it solving?
So my ambition, right, and this is my hope of what it does for the future of social care. I hope that AI can help us get back to doing care properly, in terms of actually, my ambition is that AI allows us to go back to more human contact, because actually too much of our system right now is based on a burden of like paperwork, of evidence, of bits of bobs here and there, that is very much taking away from actually those human connections that are so valuable and so important. I would absolutely love if we could find AI solutions to actually allowing people to release that burden from them and use the systems and the AI agents to be able to do that work for them, and allow them to get back to actually working with the people that are there, to be doing that hand holding, to be doing that spending quality time, and not feel like that if they don't evidence it, it didn't happen. Because that's the biggest problem I see at the moment, is that people are all the time being asked to evidence the good care that goes on just to be able to prove that it happened. And I hope that AI can take us to a place where we can not have to worry about that burden of responsibility to documenting that or to evidencing that we can actually be in a place and space where people can feel more free to actually do things that they know are more important. That's my ambition. That's my hope.
I love it because you know what, you're not alone in what you say. And I've spoke to a few carers from a company over the past couple of months that we've been bringing on, and a lot of them have said that when they was paper based, they feel that they were spending about 30% of their average visit time in the community doing paperwork and stuff like that. And one of them said, actually, that person's care time should have that added on to actually get the full hour care.
Yeah.
Because realistically, they're not getting that. They're only getting about 40 minutes of care, because the rest of it is, and I completely hear that. If I was a person that lived socially isolated by myself, and you're the only person I see all day potentially coming in, I'd want to spend that time with you. I wouldn't want you to come in and sit down and ignore me for 20 minutes doing paperwork.
Absolutely.
I think that's an amazing thing that we will try and solve as a sector. I mean, obviously they talk about these things like connected data, bringing things together, streamlining, speeding things up. But realistically, it's on the ground facing the individual is where we've got to work and get that back, and that human interaction. But also I feel AI will help, these digital systems will help bring the new generations that are growing up with tech into social care in the future. And there's nothing more off-putting than going to having to do a job if you're used to using tech to going back in time, you know, and then having to go in that way of working. And I generally feel in the next 5 years, AI, as long as it's been given the correct guardrails, will help significantly improve the sector. It will help pick up on the resource gaps, hopefully give time back to people. But I feel we're just at we're just coming up on the should we say the slope of what's to come with AI. I don't think we've fully experienced what can happen, what can go wrong.
I also think it's also what's to come with technology as a whole, putting AI aside, because I generally don't believe I think the way when you talk to like the younger generation, not like my kids, like they're obsessed with bloody phones, but like the workforce, like the younger working, a lot of them don't want. Like one of them said to me the other day, I would love like a BlackBerry to come back, like just emails, phone. Like I don't need all the other apps. I generally believe we're on the cusp of a lot of people wanting to go back to a different mobile phone. But I generally think that'll push tech into something else. And I think we have wearable glasses. I don't think we're a million miles away. I think like in the next kind of few years, everything will be different. Like I think you'll be walking down the road wearing a pair of glasses. You won't even have a phone. Phones won't be something and if it is, it's just nobody makes calls anyway, do they? Voice note or a text. I think you could be delivering care, telling your glasses what you've done, or it would recognize what you're doing and it's filling in those notes already. And I think for general population, I think I could be sat at home saying, I want to book a restaurant, and the AI and the tech in my glasses or my phone or whatever it is will know the restaurants, will know the food choices I like, will know everything, will be able to do all of that for me, and you just rock up. So I don't actually think we're a million miles away from getting back to hands-on. What we're probably more delayed on is us all implementing that into social care, but I think we'll be slow to it. I feel like the NHS or health or private health will be there a lot quicker than we will. But I think tech is going to also accelerate alongside that AI. I think it's going to be,
I think that's the thing of like, I think the terminology AI is so fashionable right now, right? Everyone's like, my product's AI, my product's AI. And then you really look at it and you go, that's not AI. Like, it's really about understanding as well what our definition of AI is so that everyone's on the same page. And I think so many people actually don't understand what AI is. And actually, I've been listening to loads of podcasts about this. I work with an amazing colleague. I've just started kind of partnering with him, and he's like a genius when it comes to AI stuff. And he's like, this is insane. There's so much that could be done that is not being done yet because people don't understand it well enough. And there's all that fear mongering around AI, right? The machines are going to take over and all of that sort of stuff. But I think that what I see AI being able to do is actually trying to see it from a positive perspective of how it can empower people to be making more decisions, to be more in control of what they're doing when they have all that knowledge. And that's how we currently use it within our services right now. So in terms of like, what do? I use AI to help support people to excel their communication, basically. So we use things like ChatGPT to come up with ideas on how to do things differently and then use the humans to turn that into reality. So, for example, we had a nutrition and hydration week, how they have these awareness weeks. So I, I call ChatGPT Gina, by the way, that's my like pet name for her. She's my personal assistant. I type into to ask Gina, hey Gina, it's Hydration Awareness Week. Can you give me some ideas about some of the things we might be able to do in my care home services to promote and support this work? Yeah, no problem. How about this? And gives me some suggestions. And I was like, oh, they're quite cool. Do you know what I would really like? I'd like 7 days worth of challenges for my staff to be able to engage in throughout the whole kind of process of the week. Yeah, no problem. Here we go. She churns out this information for me, which was like suggestions of different things that could happen over activities that could happen over the different days. And I was like, fantastic, great. I take that information, I put that into Canva, make some fancy posters because I'm really just a poster maker at heart. I love a good poster. Make a poster, fire that out to my whole care service teams. And I'm like, here's your challenge, should you choose to accept it. It's generated by AI. it's encouraged by AI, but actually what happens at the end of the day is a real person takes that challenge and they turn it into something. And what we ended up with was an amazing example of how actually with the right support, with the right knowledge, with the right information, human beings are the people that make the good work happen. They're the ones that had the good connections with the residents. They're the ones that created the moments of joy that existed in those environments. Gina can't do that. ChatGPT can't make joy. She can tell you how joy might come around best, in the best possible way, but she can't actually make it happen. So we are responsible. And that's when we become sort of like, back in the day, it would have been that idea of imagination, right? How do you turn your imagination into reality? And the kind of point I have is that AI helps us imagine so much more because it helps lead us and guide us in different ways. But you are always then a curator and editor of what it generates, and then you make something. And I think that's how we have to understand that relationship. And if we can continue to understand the relationship in that way, that means that we're not going to be into the whole place and space where the machines are driving us, but more around like, well, we can curate what we want out of this and we can make it work for us in the best possible way. So it comes back to what we're talking about way back in the beginning, which is it's about extending those relationships that you want to have with your tech providers to also how you interact with the AI that we already have, that already exists. So yeah, definitely make it work for you, not the other way around.
Oh, fantastic. And on that bombshell, what way to sign off. Oh, no, Phil, thank you very much. I've really enjoyed this conversation today. I think this has actually been our longest podcast, Mark.
It has indeed. It has indeed.
Oh God, you've lost people like one minute in, they're like, no, this chat's too long.
No, I've really enjoyed it. Honestly, there's a lot of food for thought there to take away. It's great to hear how everyday providers picture their place within the digital landscape as well. And I feel, as you say, bringing that massive contribution from the everyday organisation helps shape the software. And any company, or not just software related in general, they should react to their customer base. If their customer has a need, they should be, what can we do to help support you fix this need? Instead of, well, we're telling you how you should solve that problem. Mm-hmm. And this is what we sometimes find. But I would love to have you back on here, Alyson. I feel like we've got a good bit going here with the AI side, especially on how the providers can look at becoming more intelligent when it comes to procuring in these services and the way they operate. Fantastic, thank you. How about you, Mark?
Yeah, no, I've really enjoyed the conversation. I'm always kind of lifted after I speak to Alyson. I think she just brings that. I think it's just real talk, and that's what I love. Like, it's just honesty, and you might not be using digital systems, but you've trialed them and it hasn't worked, and you just talk honestly about why that doesn't work and the challenges. And there's no barriers to like what you're doing and what you're trying. It's very much like open in the public and very honest and raw. And yeah, I've really enjoyed today. And yeah, thank you very much for joining.
Thanks, guys. Well, I want to come back if that's all right. No, it's great. I think what I am really passionate about is having good, honest conversations. And, I'm not gatekeeping any of this. All of the stuff that I use, all the stuff that we do is available to anyone and everything as it stands at the moment. And I think it's just about sort of equalizing the playing field a little bit. We're not here in competition with each other anymore. It's about how we work together to make it as best that it can be, definitely. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity, and I get to test out this little mic, which is, I've quite liked it actually. It's quite fun.
It's a win all round, right?
Yeah, right? It's sorted. Boom. Done.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. And thank you to everyone who's listening. We hope you've enjoyed the podcast today. Don't forget to follow and subscribe. We'll chuck in some of Alyson's website and details so you can see the amazing work that Alyson does in the post. And we'll be back with you next week. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.